Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, your resource for all things business, brand, and leadership. We are excited you have decided to join us today.
Hey everybody, it's Tony Frasconi right back here on the Elevate Podcast.
Yeah, Robert Kalin.
Mike Newman here. Happy to be here with you guys today.
Robert, what are we talking about today?
You guys, I think it'd be awesome to just talk about our attitude and how ultimately our altitude is determined by our attitude and what that looks like in business and in our brand and in our leadership. You know, on the Elevate Podcast, we're talking all things business, brand, leadership. And so attitude, I feel like, is a huge player in the game that most people probably don't even think about.
So altitude, how high we can fly.
That's right.
Determined by right here in our mind, huh?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Too many times I know in my own life I've had a negative attitude, which has determined the level at which I rise to. And
peaks and valleys. That's what they used to call me.
We go
peaks
through
and
that.
valleys.
We go through that in life. But when we can surround ourselves with people who have good attitudes, who can help us to have good attitudes and remind us of a positive mindset. There's power in positive psychology. There's science that backs that up.
Well, it's really how you start anything. Your attitude at the beginning of a project is going to really determine the success of whatever it is that you're working on.
Yeah, that's good.
And so if you go in with a poor attitude, the odds are the project's not going to come out very well. Yeah. I have a lot of those in my life that I could tell stories about. But truthfully, I have, when you brought this topic up, I have a reminder in my bathroom, my master bath at home, of when we put in new tile. I didn't have a great attitude about doing it. I have this little bump that every day it reminds me to have a good attitude because it was my wife wanted to do the project. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
And long story short, the mortar mix didn't have enough water in it. I didn't want to go down and bring more water up, and so we tried to smooth it, and there's that little bump.
Yeah,
every
even
day.
just in the mornings sometimes, getting for me, just for those of you who don't know, I've got 3 children. They're about 12, 10, and 5, basically. So in the mornings can look, some mornings everyone's up early and on time, and we have breakfast, and then other mornings it is just
a zoo.
I've got some other words I want to say, but it's so hard. And in those moments when I let my mind spiral into the negativity, everything is just like the weight of everything just becomes so much harder.
Yeah.
And when you choose to consciously stay above it, even though it might be difficult to lean into that, because it's easy, right? The bad attitude, I think we're probably wired a little bit to the negative, right? We're wired in that fight or flight. We're wired to survive. So we're always looking to how to not have to do more and how to get what we want, get our needs met. And so it's a hard I think it's hard. And I think part of the challenge is when you think about attitude, people always say, well, you got to have a good attitude. And I think when I think of that, sometimes my mind goes to, well, I want to be authentic. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be fake. And I think there might be other listeners out there that are like, well, how do you have a good attitude when you're not feeling good inside?
That's good.
But you're in a situation that you're frustrated about. How do you actually keep in a good attitude without actually on the outward coming off as being fake, or keeping your integrity inside and not being fake?
And I think something like attitude can have a spiral effect, or can have an elevating effect, creating the altitude. And so sometimes you do have to, take on an attitude that right now maybe you aren't feeling, but when we do something that we know is the right thing to do, but don't necessarily feel like doing it, by doing it, then we move into a mindset of doing the right thing and having a better attitude about it.
Yeah, and I also think, a lot of times we don't feel like something, it's a perspective thing, right? So, you wake up with the kids and the kids are all fighting you to get ready in the morning, right? And you're like, I don't feel like arguing with you today. Just listen to me. Put your shoes on. We're walking out the door. Finish your breakfast, whatever that looks like, right? And sometimes we just need to reset our mind, recalibrate our mind to say what's really important. Is getting out the door on time the most important thing, or is being kind and showing up for my kids in the way they need me to show up the most important thing? That's kind of how I look at attitude. It's more of a recalibration, and I think that's why I said earlier about being around people who can help you kind of have that positive mindset, just to remind you like the important things in life.
Yeah. I think there's a great one of the earlier motivational speakers. I think his name was maybe Dr. Vincent Norman Peale, something like. He wrote the book The Power of Positive Thinking, and I remember listening to a recording of him speaking about a magazine, the subscription list that he and his partners were trying to build, and everybody for a significant amount of time was talking about just all the challenges of building a subscription list, and they were going to have to fold this magazine basically. And somebody in the room stood up and said, I've been sitting here for an hour listening to all the things that we can't do and everything that's wrong with what we are doing and how much money we're not making, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is going well? What do we have? What assets can we go get, et cetera, et cetera? And it just, in that moment, this group of like 10 people just totally reshifted the conversation, and they went on to, have the best next quarter, next year, et cetera, and to a successful magazine. I can't remember what it was called, but in that one, he talked a lot about that one meeting.
Yeah.
The power of the positive thinking, and that's kind of was the premise of his book.
So good. And it's true. I mean, how many times do we, like you said earlier, like we're naturally wired for the negative? How many times do we just automatically go there with whatever assumptions we have? This is too hard. I don't have enough resources to make this happen. When the reality is, if you just pull back a little bit, get a bigger perspective picture of what's going on, and then evaluate what's important.
Yeah.
It can change everything.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know who the author is right off the top of my head, but this guy talks about that so often we're down on the dance floor and we're bumping into everybody all the time that every now and then we've got to get up on the balcony and then look so we can actually see that, on the other side of the dance floor is where all the food and refreshments are, versus I've been bumping into 100 people here or 5 people in my tight little circle. And by getting a different perspective gives us an advantage point that you're just saying that person that stood up in the room, they said, I have a different perspective. I want to see if I can get everybody else to see something different as well. And so I think when we talk about the altitude that we rise with our attitude is oftentimes we just have to shift our mind out of the negative thinking that's taking place or the woe is me type of thing, if we're just talking to ourselves, and get up above and go, what's on the horizon that we can move to?
Yeah, so good.
Mike, do you think that in a lot of the engagements that you do, working with teams and businesses and coaching executives, do you think attitude comes up quite a bit as far as when we think of like business strategies, success strategies, leadership strategies? Is attitude, I mean, we've got a whole episode here around attitude, is essential to achievement. Do you see that?
I would say that it doesn't necessarily come up as the word, but it's the behavior that you see. And so I got this group of people that are, just really slowing things down. Okay, well, that's an attitude. It's a behavior, but it's also an attitude. And how do you, as the leader, raise that attitude and expectation? And one of the things is that we sometimes forget about is we all use this fundamental attribution error, which basically is if Robert cuts me off on the road, he's a flippin' idiot, and why doesn't he ever learn to drive? And when I'm in a hurry and I cut in front of somebody, it's because I got important places to go and things to do. And so I always assume I'm doing the best.
Yeah. You're the best driver.
And I give the worst to somebody else instead of saying, I bet he's probably got a family emergency that he has to deal with. And it's too bad that his grandmother, is in the hospital or, whatever might be going on. We just assume the worst in somebody else and the best for ourselves. And we need to kind of, not assume the worst for ourselves, but switch the other part around and say, Robert's intentions are really good, and he's got places to go and things to do, and he probably didn't even notice that I was there.
We have talked about this before at some point. I don't know if it was on a podcast, but the fact that we judge other people based on their actions and we judge ourselves by our intentions. But if we did the action piece for everybody or the intention piece for everybody to make it equal playing field, that's where perspectives can change a little bit, where you open up to, you take the beach ball analogy, right? All of us, if we had a beach ball sitting between us here, all of us be looking at a different color. You'd say, hey, no, this beach ball is red. I'm looking at it. It's red right now. And be like, no, it's yellow. Mike might say it's blue. In reality, we're all right. But at the same time, if we were able to just get up here and look down on the beach ball, we'd see there's 8 colors. This beach ball is represented in a whole, right?
Sure. Well, I think that the reason I was thinking about asking Mike that question is because he deals so much in leadership as kind of a focal point of his business and how he shows up in the world. And this podcast, right, it's all things business, brand, and leadership. What you just talked about a little bit, right, looking at the beach ball, seeing different perspectives. Let's highlight that a little bit as far as attitude and a brand. When we think of a brand and how we look at it, how it's seen, how does an attitude, how does attitude and how that brand is elevated play out?
Your brand is really you.
Right.
Your attitude comes out in everything. If you are edgy, you've got an edgy brand.
There we go.
If you are on, I don't know, it's a piece of who you are. It comes out in everything that you do. And so your brand is really the message that you send out to every single person who comes in contact with you or what you're doing.
Yeah. And so do you want your brand to be, recognized as something that's positive and making a difference, or do you want to be, seen as, something different than that? And so you as the leader in the organization, your attitude around what you're doing and what you put as the values that you have make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think, with that, attitude, your attitude is an expression of everything that you believe. Deep down, your values, like you said, sometimes you can say, I have a value, right? And I can say this value out here. Let's just say my value is love, okay? I put it out there and I say, one of my values is love. I want everyone to know when I'm around that they're loved, they're seen, they're known, right? But to someone else, even though I said it, to someone else, they go, oh yeah, my value is love too. But my value of love is me. Like, what do I get out of this? I love me and I want to have more. I want to have an experience. I want whatever, right? So we can put our values out there, and we need to have values match in our businesses as we are building them with our customers, right? So these values matches that happen, these attitudes that are expressed, they come out in the messaging and the marketing that happens.
Exactly.
By how you're teaching your customer what you are.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. I mean, thanks to Delano's Coffee Roasters, by the way, for allowing us to use this great podcast studio space. But we've talked about walking into this building and having an experience in just an awesome building. And this brand of Delano's Coffee Roasting is, it exudes what we see and how we interact with the brand and what we think of when we drink their coffee, etc. Right? It's all connected.
Absolutely.
And that goes to what you deal with a lot in leadership, because you often say, I've heard you say that it does start at the top and infiltrates everything. And so if that's true, then the values of the organization should be tied to the leadership, which should be played out, which then ties into the brand.
Yeah.
So let me say this about, and this is a real simple explanation about it, but when you squeeze an orange, what do you get?
Orange juice.
Yeah.
And a lemon, you get?
Lemon juice.
And when you squeeze a person, what do you get?
Person juice.
Person juice? Whatever's inside.
That's right.
So if meanness and honoriness is inside, you get that. And if love and compassion are inside, you get that. If whatever it is. And so how God made you is, part of our responsibility is make sure what's inside comes out good.
Yeah.
And so the altitude of our attitude is going to be what comes out when we get squeezed.
That's good. I I love that analogy, being squeezed. I've heard the tea bag analogy before. We're all like tea bags. What comes out when you get in hot water, right?
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that when we get this thought of being squeezed, and if you think about your life and you're out there right now and you're hearing this, you're like, man, I'm getting squeezed from every angle right now. I need to hear this. That those uncomfortable moments, you not only have an opportunity to show up with the attitude that we're talking about, but then those moments are really those moments that propel you into the altitude, because those moments are where you're going to experience the most growth, and often, get to that next mountaintop, that next level that you wouldn't have been able to get to unless you had been squeezed. And sometimes it's super uncomfortable. I'm not trying to make light of anybody going through a hard time. Absolutely. But ultimately, that is the silver lining of the hard times. That is the light of the end at the end of the tunnel of the hard times. Is that there's more out there. There's more for me, and I'm going to show up in the world better because of it.
Yeah, it's so good. It's cool to see how it plays out, and that there's a purpose in the squeezing, the pain, the struggle, the hurt, whatever it is. I keep thinking of like working on a project, and I had redone my roof, and I'm putting nails on the head, and I smashed my thumb, and instantly I was like, oh, I could like throw my hammer right now, but what good is that gonna do, right? So I held my thumb there for just a second, and I continued working. The pain went away. It didn't last forever. And I think about sometimes when we're in the pain, we think it's forever. We think it's permanent. We don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so leaving that with our audience right now, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Keep that attitude through those moments of being squeezed, and you're going to come out on the other side, and you're going to be better for it. And the people that you serve will see that, and they will be served in a way that you couldn't have done before. So keep on with the attitude, you guys. You're going to hit new altitudes, and you're going to be able to elevate whatever it is that you're doing. Super excited of this topic today, you guys, and to have you in the studio and to share this time with you.
We will see everybody at the next elevation. Ooh, what do you guys think of that?
Good.
Love it. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Elevate Podcast out.
Thanks for joining us today on the Elevate Podcast, your resource for all things business, brand, and leadership. For a deeper dive into the content and to get access to resources like our free show notes, go to countercultureleaders.com/podcast and sign up for our newsletter. Hey, don't forget to like, rate, and review, and subscribe, and share this content with your friends and colleagues. This is Mike Newman. Looking forward to seeing you next week.